Hello world and welcome to Hacks. In this video we're going to be looking at part 1 of the red teaming path on TryHackMe. If you haven't seen my introductory video you may want to skip back and have a look at that. But essentially TryHackMe is an online digital playground that lets you learn and level up hacking skills. And they've just released a new red teaming learning path for which you can get a certificate at the end. But we're going to go through it starting with the very first rooms. Now, prior warning, I don't think the first room is entirely that technical, so we won't be doing much. It will just be learning about the fundamentals of red teaming. So I will read through that with you and give my thoughts and opinions on that. But I don't think there's too much technical challenges involved in the first few rooms. It's more just digesting information. So let's get started. Red teaming. Learn the skills needed to become a red team operator. Use diverse techniques for initial access, enumerate and persist on targets, evade security solutions, and exploit Active Directory. So you can see here, the aim of this pathway is to show you how to enumerate a potential adversary attack in complex environments, going beyond penetration testing. You will learn to conduct successful red team engagements and challenge the defensive capabilities of your clients. After completing this pathway, you will have the advanced skill set needed to pursue a new career opportunities in offensive security. No prior knowledge. You need no prerequisite to start this pathway. Although they have advised that taking the sort of junior pen tester path is pretty good beforehand, I imagine it will come in useful when we get into the more technical things. So you can see here the rooms are laid out as so, and we're starting with this room here, Red Team Fundamentals. Learn the core concepts of red team engagements from threat intelligence to OPSEC and C2s. C2s are your command and controls. Red Team Fundamentals. Learn the basics of red team engagement, the main concept and stakeholders involved, and how red teaming differs from other cybersecurity engagements. Let's go. Cybersecurity is a constant race between white hat hackers and black hat hackers. As threats in the cyber world evolve, so does the need for more specialized services that allow companies to prepare for real attacks the best they can. While conventional security engagements like vulnerability assessments and penetration tests could provide an excellent overview of the technical security posture of a company, they might overlook some other aspects that real attackers can exploit. In that sense, we could say that conventional penetration tests are good at showing vulnerabilities so that you can take proactive measures, but might not teach you how to respond to an actual ongoing attack by a motivated adversary. And the objectives of this room are to learn about the basics of red team engagements, identify the main components and stakeholders involved in a red team engagement, understand the main differences between red team and other types of security engagements. Before beginning this room, a familiarity with general hacking techniques is required, although not strictly necessary. Completing the junior penetration testing learning path is recommended. We don't have to answer a question for the first one, we just need to confirm that we've read it. Task 2, vulnerability assessments. This is the simplest form of security assessment and is the main objective to identify as many vulnerabilities in as many systems in the network as possible. To this end, concessions may be made to meet this goal efficiently. For example, the attacker's machine may be listed on the available security solutions to avoid interfering with the vulnerability discovery process. This makes sense since the objective is to look at every host on the network and evaluate its security posture individually while providing the most information to the company about where to focus its remediation efforts. To summarize, a vulnerability assessment focuses on scanning hosts for vulnerabilities as individual entities so that security deficiencies can be identified and an effective security measures can be deployed to protect the network in a prioritized manner. Most of the work can be done with automated tools and performed by operators without requiring much technical knowledge. An example is this, as if you were to run a vulnerability assessment over the network, you would normally try to scan as many of the hosts as possible, but wouldn't actually try exploiting any vulnerabilities at all. This is so true. As someone who works in cybersecurity and has only been working in it for a couple of years, I can say that a lot of the time all my responsibility is to turn up on site, run Nessus against their network, and then verify a lot of the findings. And to verify a lot of the findings, I will just get duplicate tool outputs from different sources. So if I run Nessus, then I'll run mmap to verify some of the findings, or I will run something like Metasploit, but I won't use exploit or run. I would just use the check option to see if the host is actually vulnerable. And it's true what they're saying about them like having our attack laptops or our attack, where we're launching the attacks from, put on the allow list. This is often a prerequisite in industries when you're doing a vulnerability assessment, is you say to the client, ensure that all of our devices are whitelisted or allow listed, so that they won't be, any network intrusion detection systems or firewalls won't interfere with our scanning efforts. And you can see there's a nice diagram, a compromised host. I don't see that on the pen tester, the internet, the router. So this is the firewall. This is where you're likely to run into issues trying to get into the network, and firewall evasion and all that. And then you got Alice and Bob PCs, Alice and Bob, and then some internet. Penetration tests. On top of scanning every single host for vulnerabilities, we often need to understand how they impact our network as a whole. Penetration tests add to vulnerability assessments by allowing a pen tester to explore the impact of an attacker on the overall network by doing additional steps that include attempt to exploit the vulnerabilities found on each system. This is important as sometimes vulnerabilities might exist in a system, but compensatory controls are in place effectively prevent its exploitation. It allows us to test if we can use the detected vulnerabilities to compromise a given host. Conduct post-exploitation tasks on a compromised host, allowing us to find if we can extract any helpful information from them, or if we might be able to use them to pivot from the hosts pivot from hosts that were not previously accessible from where we stand. Penetration tests might start by scanning for vulnerabilities just as regular vulnerability assessments, but provide further information on how attacker can chain vulnerabilities to achieve specific goals. While its focus remains on identifying vulnerabilities and establishing measures to protect the network, it also considers the network as a whole ecosystem and how an attacker could profit from interactions between its components. If we were to perform a penetration test using the same example network as before, on top of scanning all the hosts on the network for vulnerabilities, we could try to confirm if they can be exploited in order to show the impact an attacker could have on the network. So you can see there, he's got through the firewall, compromised an FTP server, compromised a web server, compromised Alice's PC. So it looks like he's gone into the web server and used the web server to pivot to Alice's PC using some weak credentials. By analysing how an attacker could move around our network, we can gain a basic insight on possible security measure bypasses and our ability to detect a real threat actor to a certain extent. Limited because of the scope of the penetration test is usually extensive, and penetration testers don't care much about being loud or generating lots of alerts on security devices, since time constraints on such projects often require us to check the network in a short space of time. Couldn't agree more with that last bit. Honestly, hackers have all the time in the world. If they've got a particular target in mind, they can spend months, years just performing reconnaissance against it. As a penetration tester, you'll be lucky to get 2, 3, 4, 5 days. With that said, I've just spent a month in Paris on a test, but that's a different matter entirely. But yeah, usually you're time constrained to what you can do. And yeah, it's a good example there of why penetration tests are generally better than vulnerability assessments. One thing they didn't mention in there, which I will bring up, is a lot of the time what you may find is that Nessus, Nmap, OpenVAS and other things can produce false positives. And because it's produced a false positive with Nmap, it's likely that another tool that you use will also detect it as a false positive, and you won't actually know if it's vulnerable until you try to exploit it. There's one big one that I keep running into quite a lot. It's IKE aggressive handshake mode. It always comes up, but it's usually never actually a finding. So something to consider there. It's another area why penetration tests can be better than vulnerability assessments, because if you're not actively trying to exploit it, you don't know for sure if it's actually vulnerable. Advanced persistent threats and why regular pen testing is not enough. While the conventional security engagements we have mentioned cover the finding of the most technical vulnerabilities, there are limitations on such processes to the extent to which they can't effectively prepare a company against a real threat actor. Some limitations include time constraints, budget, limited scope, non-disruptive, and heavy IT focus. As a consequence, some aspects of penetration tests might significantly differ from a real attack, like penetration tests are loud. Usually pen testers won't put much effort into trying to go undetected. Unlike real attackers, they don't mind being easy to detect, as they have been contracted to find as many vulnerabilities as they can in as many hosts as possible. Non-technical attack vectors might be overlooked. Attacks based on social engineering and physical intrusions are usually not included in what is tested. Relaxation of security mechanisms. While doing a regular penetration test, some security mechanisms might have temporarily been disabled for relaxed for the penetration testing team in favor of efficiency. Although this might sound counterintuitive, it is essential to remember that pen testers have a limited time to check the network. Therefore, it is usually desired not to waste their time searching for exotic ways to bypass intrusion detection, intrusion prevention, and web application firewall, intrusion deception, or other security members, but rather focus on reviewing critical technological infrastructure for vulnerabilities. On the other hand, real attackers won't follow an ethical code and are most likely unrestricted in their actions. Nowadays, the most prominent threat vectors are known as Advanced Persistent Threats, APTs, which is a highly skilled group of attackers, usually sponsored by nations or organized criminal groups. They primarily target critical infrastructure, financial organizations, and government institutions. They are called persistent because the operations of these groups can remain undetected on a compromised network for long periods. If a company is affected by an APT, would it be prepared to respond effectively? Can they detect the method used to gain and maintain access on their networks if the attacker has been there for several months? What if the initial access was obtained because John at accounting opened a suspicious email attachment? What if a zero-day exploit was involved? Do previous penetration tests prepare us for this? To provide a more realistic approach to security, red team engagements were born. Now we've got some questions. Would a vulnerability assessment prepare us to detect a real attacker in our networks? I'm going to go ahead and say nay. During a penetration test, are you concerned about being detected by the client? Again, nay. Highly organized groups of skilled attackers are nowadays referred to as Advanced Persistent Threats. And that's that, and I couldn't agree more with everything in this article. Again, working in security, these constraints are absolutely correct. Time constraints. Time leads into the budget because the clients never want to pay for more time than they have to. Limited scope. Often what you'll find is that clients only want to present the best areas of their network, so you can go into their network, and if you accidentally slipped out of scope, you might find that there's a hell of a lot of vulnerable things there. But that tends to be the case, is they want to get the checkpoint in their report to say it's secure when the rest of their network is entirely jank. Non-disruptive. Now again, when you go in and do a penetration test, you don't want to end up taking down their entire network and disrupting day-to-day operations. I mean, tests should be performed in a non-production environment, but that's not always the case. And yeah, they don't want their stuff disrupted, so that's likely they won't have pen testers test their sort of work areas, you know, where people are set up on their PCs. And heavy IT focus. Yeah, it focuses entirely on the technology. Doesn't take into consideration social engineering at all. Things like phishing emails, things like ringing up and trying to obtain passwords. If you've ever read Kevin Mitnick's book on the art of exploitation, it covers that area of hacking amazingly, and it gives you a number of scenarios on how you can socially engineer people into getting information from them, like their passwords. Part 3. Red Team Engagements. To keep up with the emerging threats, Red Team Engagements were designed to shift focus from regular penetration tests into a process that allows us to clearly see our defensive team's capabilities at detecting and responding to real threat actors. They don't replace traditional penetration tests, but complement them by focusing on detection and response rather than prevention. Red Teaming is borrowed from the military. In military exercises, a group would take the role of the Red Team to simulate attack techniques to test the reaction capabilities of the defending team, generally known as the Blue Team, against known adversarial strategies. Translated into the world of cybersecurity, Red Team engagements consist of emulating a real threat actor's tactics, techniques, and procedures so that we can measure how well our Blue Team responds to them and ultimately improve our security controls in place. Every red team engagement will start by defining clear goals, often referred to as the crown jewels or flags, ranging from compromising a given critical host to stealing some sensitive information from the target. Usually the blue team won't be informed of such exercises to avoid introducing any biases in their analysis. The red team will do everything they can to achieve the goals while remaining undetected and evading any existing security mechanisms like firewalls, antivirus, EDR, IPS and others. Notice how the red team engagement, not all of the hosts on the network would check for vulnerabilities. A real attacker would only need to find a single path to its goal, and if it's not interested in performing noisy scans that the blue team could detect. Taking the same network as before on a red team engagement where the goal is to compromise the intranet server, we could plan for a way to reach our objective while interacting as little as possible with other hosts. Meanwhile, the blue team's capability to detect and respond accordingly to the attack can be evaluated. So you can see there, you got your red team pen tester, he's gone through the firewall, you got some blue team looking out there, he's done some firewall evasion to get through there, and he's managed to get on Bob's PC with a phishing campaign. So he sent him an email, Bob's opened up the attachment because he's Bob, and then he's used that to get into the intranet server, where you could probably use it as like a watering hole type attack or an actual stage so that whenever people visit it, they get compromised. It is important to know that the final objective of such exercises should never be for the red team to beat the blue team, but rather simulate enough TTPs for the blue team to learn to react to real ongoing threat adequately. If needed, they could tweak or add security controls that help to improve their detection capabilities. Red team engagements also improve on regular penetration tests by considering several attack services. The technical infrastructure, like the regular penetration tests, the red team will try to uncover technical vulnerabilities with a much higher emphasis on stealth and evasion. Social engineering, targeting people through phishing campaigns, phone calls or social media to trick them into revealing information that should be private. Physical intrusion, using techniques like lockpicking, RFID cloning, exploiting weaknesses in electronic access control devices to their access restricted areas of facilities. Depending on the resources available, the red team exercises can be run several ways. Full engagement, simulate an attacker's workflow from an initial compromise until final goals have been achieved. Assume breach, start by assuming that the attacker has already gained control over some of the assets and try to achieve the goals from there. As an example, the red team could receive access to some users' credentials or even a workstation into the internal network. Tabletop exercise, an over-the-top simulation where scenarios are discussed between red and blue teams to evaluate how they would theoretically respond to certain threats, ideal for situations where doing live simulations might be complicated. And now it looks like we have some questions. The goal of a red team engagement will often be referred to, wasn't it something like crown jewels? Yep, crown jewels or flags. Did I spell that wrong? The next question is tactics, techniques and procedures. So it's asking, during a red team engagement, common methods used by attackers are emulated against the target. Such methods are usually called TTPs. What do TTPs stand for? Tactics, techniques and procedures. The main objective of a red team is to detect as many vulnerabilities in as many hosts as possible, yay or nay. Obviously the answer is nay, it's just to get in and compromise it. And yeah, I love how they've explained all this. Some terminologies I've not heard of before. Crown jewels, RIP to the Queen. Flags are often familiar with. Again, talking about the social engineering aspect of it, phishing campaigns, phone calls, using social media, using things like Maltego to sort of gain enough information about a particular employee in the network, see where his leverage points are, see if he's in a position where he may have higher privileges but may not be that technical, and then send him a phishing campaign relating to his work saying you need to download this PDF immediately because it contains the latest financial figures, and then he runs it and it executes a malicious payload, and then his computer's infected and you're on there and into the intranet. And I like these ways that they've broken it down as well, where you get like a full engagement where you have no access and you just go in and try to do it however you want. Assume breach, again, this is sort of like where pen testers come in, where vulnerability assessments or vulnerability scans come in. You know, you're already in the network, in their internal network, and you scan them. And then a tabletop exercise. I can see why this would be useful in sort of like highly sensitive networks where equipment might fall over, or things where like IoT is involved, where like an Nmap scan could send like a robot arm absolutely crazy. But yeah, very good room, very good information, very informative. I should try and make notes of some of these terminologies. Task 4. Teams and functions of an engagement. There are several factors and people involved with red team engagements. Everyone will have their mindset and methodology to approach the engagement personnel. However, each engagement can be broken down into 3 teams or cells. Below is a brief table illustrating each of the teams and a brief explanation of their responsibilities. Team definition. So, red cell. A red cell is the component that makes up the offensive portion of the red team engagement that simulates a given target's strategic and tactical responses. Blue cell. The blue cell is the opposite side of the red cell. It includes all the components defending a target network. The blue cell is typically comprised of blue team members, defenders, internal staff, and an organization's management. The white cell serves as a referee between the red cell activities and the blue cell responses during engagement, controls the engagement environment network, monitors adherence to the rules of engagement, coordinates activities requiring to achieve engagement goals, correlates red cell activities with defensive actions, ensures the engagement is conducted without bias to either side. Definitions are sourced from redteam.guide. I have to have a look at that. These teams or cells can be broken down further into engagement hierarchies. You see there, you got the white cell trusted agents at the top, then you got the red cell lead, the red cell assistant, the red cell operators, all part of the red cell, and then the blue cell, you got the blue cell lead and the blue cell analysis. Never heard these terms before. Since the red team orientated room, we will focus on the responsibilities of the red cell. Below is a table outlining the roles and responsibilities of the members of the red cell. Red team lead plans and organizes engagements at a high level, delegates assistant lead and operators engagement assignments. Red team assistant assists the team lead in overseeing engagement operations and operators, can also assist in writing engagement plans and documents if needed. Red team operator executes assignments delegated by team leads, interprets and analyzes engagement plans for team leads. As with most red team functions, each team and a company will have its own structure and roles for each team member. The above table only acts as an example for typical responsibilities for each role. What cell is responsible for the operations of an engagement? Well, we know that. What cell is responsible for? Is it just red cell? What cell is a trusted agent considered part of? Well, that's going to be your white cell. Okay, that's cool. That's got a lot of information I've never heard on before. I've never heard of red teams referred to as cells. I realise they're all going to have some sort of management structure. It's like when you do a penetration test or a vulnerability assessment, you usually have a project lead. And I assume in this case that is what the red cell lead is doing. And then you'd have your sort of operators underneath. I imagine this red cell assistant is quite an optimistic thing to have, but hey, there we go. Task 5. Engagement structure. A core function of a red team is adversary emulation. While not mandatory, it is commonly used to assess what a real-world adversary would do in an environment using the tools and methodologies. The red team can use various cyber kill chains to summarize and assess the steps and procedures of an engagement. The blue team commonly uses cyber kill chains to map behaviors and break down adversaries' movements. The red team can adapt this idea to map adversary TTPs, tactics, techniques and procedures to components of an engagement. Many regulation and standardization bodies have released their cyber kill chain. Each kill chain roughly follows the same structure, with some going more in depth to defining the objectives differently. Below is a small list of standard cyber kill chains. In this room, we will commonly reference the Lockheed Martin cyber kill chain. It is the more standardized kill chain than others and is very commonly used among red team and blue teams. Definitely have to have a look at that too. The Lockheed Martin kill chain focuses on perimeter or external breach. Unlike other kill chains, it does not provide an in-depth breakdown of internal movement. You can think of this chain as a summary of all behaviors and operations present. So yeah, you've got the various stages of like a hack here. So you got your recon, that's going to be like your open source intelligence. You're looking at what is potentially exploitable. Weaponization, so I imagine that's like writing payloads or writing malicious software, delivering it, so using a method of delivering it. Exploitation, executing a payload. Installation is just going to be like installing malware on the system and then having it communicate back to the command and control. And then action on objectives. Probably a bad explanation of that, but I assume that's sort of how each area has been broken down. Components of the cyber kill chain are broken down into the following table. Okay, so technique, purpose, examples. Reconnaissance, obtain information on the target. Harvesting emails, open source intelligence. Yes. Weaponization, combine the objective with an exploit. Commonly results in deliverable payload. Exploit with a backdoor, malicious office document. Delivery. How will the weaponized function be delivered to the target? Via email, web, or USB. Exploitation. Exploit the target system to execute MS-17010, Eternal Blue, Zero Login, etc. etc. Installation. Install malware or other tooling. Mimikatz, to get your hashes, Rubius, etc. Command and control. Control the compromised asset from a remote control center. C2s. Empire, Cobalt Strike. I think Metasploit can be considered one of those. Actions on objectives, any end objectives, ransomware, data exfiltration, etc. Conti Lockbit 2. Cool. If an adversary deployed Mimikatz on a target machine, where would they be placed in the Lockheed Martin cyber kill chain? So we know that's there, so we're just going to go with installation. See how easy this is? What technique's purpose is to exploit the target system to execute code? Well, that's going to be exploitation or weaponization. I'm just going to say exploitation. Hope for the best. Fingers crossed. Hey, done. Yeah. Again, I do know of these cyber kill chains. I've not studied them extensively, and Lockheed Martin being like the head of like weapons manufacturing, I'm sure they have like a very advanced cyber defense program. You can imagine they've got a lot of intellectual property that needs to be protected, so I bet they've got one of the best cyber teams in the universe. But yeah, definitely something I need to read through, and would recommend everybody else read through if you're interested in red teaming. Overview of a red team engagement. All the things we have discussed come together when performing a red team engagement. To better understand how the component stakeholders interact, we will analyze a simplified engagement example. Navigate to the green View Site button to continue. Notice how the cyber kill chain naturally aligns with the exercise. We start with recon phase. We gather as much intel as we can about the target, followed by weaponization and delivery by sending a phishing email with malicious attachment, continued by exploitation installation phases when using local exploits to elevate privileges on Bob's PC, and then installing tools and compromising hosts to dump the password hashes and perform lateral movement to finish with action and objectives where a connection to our target is finally made. So yeah, it looks like we've got a little exercise here where we need to capture a flag. Let's take a look. So red team engagements. Red and white teams define the goal of the exercise, access to transactional DB of the bank. White and red teams will define the goals that align with the business risk scenarios. Blue team is usually not informed at this stage about the exercise, as we want to analyze their natural response against the attacker. I like the comment. Red team gathers intel on the bank and plans a strategy based on TTPs, lists by APTs, targeting similar financial institutions. The red team gathers as much information as they can about the bank, including technologies in use. You can usually get that from like LinkedIn and places, list of employees, or job openings. You need to be proficient in these technologies. Well, you've just told me what technologies you use. Information on social media, photos, and other usable information. Photos and social media is really good for physical assessments, because if they're at a work party or they've got photos of them at work, they might reveal like their lanyard style, the little badge you wear around your neck. And if you can clone that or find an employee that looks a little bit like you and fake their identity, then you never know, you might get past physical security. Threat intelligence sources are also used to check APTs targeting similar companies to get a better grasp of the TTPs and tools they use. An example, you can check car banks information. With all the information at hand, the red team will create a plan that includes several TTPs that fit the target and get it approved by the white team. Emulating TTP phishing campaign. Phishing emails detected. Do not open. Malicious. However, some users had already opened the email as malicious attachment. The red team gained access to Bob's PC with Bob's privileges. The red team starts the engagement by emulating a phishing campaign against a list of emails they made based on employees' names found on LinkedIn and detected a pattern by the email addresses. Yeah, every organization that I know uses first name dot last name at company domain. It's maybe we should just start using numerical values, non-sequential ABC. You know, granted it's going to be hard to remember, and you'd have to use like global address lists to assign the email address to the username, but surely that's just security for obscurity at that point, and you need to work better on your actual security. The phishing campaign was detected. The blue team sent an email to all employees to warn them of an ongoing threat. This still allowed the attack to carry on, as there was no process in place to check for possibly infected PCs or even deleted any copies of the malicious email from all users' inboxes. Phishing alerts. To all employees, please avoid opening the email subject account suspended, as part of it is an ongoing phishing scam. Remember that we won't ever ask for your credentials via email. Remember to attend the cybersecurity training at 1000 hours. See you there, Ben. Uh-oh. Account suspended. Your account has been suspended due to a compromised password. To avoid suspension, please log in to the following link. Does that actually... Oh, no, it's on example.com. Okay. Cool. That would be cool if actually... Yeah. Okay. So... Privilege escalation and persistence. Local privilege escalation and persistence. Who I am, Bob. I'm persisted. Undetected. By applying antivirus evasion techniques, it was possible to cloak a known local exploit to gain system account privileges without being detected. By dumping on local accounts, a password hash for a local admin backup was obtained. The hash couldn't be cracked. The red team found missing Windows patches on Bob's PC. One of them allowed for print nightmare exploitation. While the available public exploit was detected by many AV solutions, some AV evasion techniques were successfully applied to avoid triggering any alarms, obtaining system privileges. The red team was able to upload and run a modified version of Mimikatz to extract the local password hashes, including the local administrator account's backup. Yeah, it's terrifying, Mimikatz, because if a domain admin is logged into your PC or another PC and that hash is still in memory, boom, grab the hash, crack it, you know, you got DA on the network. Scary. Or something like that. Again, I haven't done it, but it's just something I've read. Yeah, so we have LSA dump, Sam, Banks, syskey, Sam, key, Sasha, sys and Sam, RIDS, administrator, NTLM, hashes, cool. Backups. Lateral movement. Bob's PC to the DBA PC database administrator, avoids the firewall, straight to the database, detected backups, login attempt on blah blah blah, suspicious logs. A direct connection from Bob PC to the database was blocked by the firewall. Listen past the hash. Sorry, the font, man. Using past the hash, it was possible to connect to the DBA PC using backup users password hash using credentials found on a text file on the DBA's PC's desktop. Suppose some of us may be guilty of that. It was possible to access the database. The red team uses pass the hash attack against all hosts on the network to check if the backup user could log into other hosts. No direct connection could be made to the DB server, as the firewall policies were in place to prevent it. After doing some additional recon, a workstation called DBA PC was identified using pass the hash. DBA PC was compromised and used to pivot to connect to the database server. While the pass the hash attempts triggered many alerts on the login attempts for the user backups, the blue team ignored them as they were confused by a batch backup process which runs monthly. Oh, that's funny. In the end, red, white and blue teams will check together how security controls can be improved in order to be ready for a real threat. After finishing with the exercise, red, white and blue teams will meet to discuss how to improve the security of the bank. Although we are focused on the specific TTPs that allow the red team to reach its objective in a real life engagement. Sorry, still laughing at that joke. You will usually have failed attempts as well. It's important to note that those failed attempts can still provide valid information. Reporting and analysis. In the end, red, white and blue teams will check together how security controls can be improved in order to be ready for a real threat. After finishing with the exercise, red, white and blue teams will meet and discuss about how to improve the security of the bank. Although we are focusing on specific TTPs that allow the red team to reach its objective, in real life engagement you will usually have failed attempts as well. It is important to note that those failed attempts can still provide valid information for the exercise. Suppose, for example, that you ran some brute force attacks against the DB server and never got any valid credentials from it. It might still be interesting to check if the blue team detected that attack at the end of the engagement. Also, remember that many things that might take unexpected turns during an engagement. Maintaining clear communication between red and white teams is vital to make decisions that will direct the exercise in the right course and avoid conflicts at the end of the road. And there we got our flag at the end. Use THM red team rocks to answer the question on TryHackMe. So let's grab that. Let's go down to here and let's post that. And then how do we get rid of that? Do we just minimize it? Yeah, fantastic. Task 7, Conclusion. A simplified overview of red team engagements has been provided in this room. The main concepts, components and stakeholders have been introduced to gain a first understanding of such exercises. In the room that follows, you will learn all of the planning behind a real engagement, as well as a lot of cool techniques a real attacker would use along the way, including how to use threat intelligence to your advantage, evade security mechanisms present in modern hosts, perform lateral movement and try to avoid detection at all costs. So yeah, while this wasn't a most technical room, I don't want to jump ahead and just do the labs. I kind of want to do a complete series on going through these rooms, answering the questions and doing the various labs. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you found it informative. If you haven't signed up to TryHackMe already, then it's completely worth doing it. You can see there, like, you know, it was a lot of fun reading through this, gain a lot of information, TTPs and all that. And yeah, that's all I've got for you today. Get on TryHackMe if you want to do red teaming, and I will see you in the next one. Kind regards.